Okay, so it's been a long time since I addressed something stupid. Let's see what we can find.
People generally think that science is all about truth, but as we'll show in this video, it is nowhere near the truth, and its explanations about your existence and your purpose are just as absurd as mainstream religion.
Okay, that'll work.
Every era thinks that they have it all figured out, and the ideas of the past were crazy. Those born in the early ages of humanity thought that their primitive stories about creation were true, and those born in the Christian era thought that their religious ideas were true.
So, no real difference then.
And most born today think that scientific materialism is true, but in actuality, the people of the future will look back on scientific materialism as a primitive and childish view of reality.
I'm just gonna save that clip for later. I think it'll come in handy.
You see, people assume that scientific materialism is rational. However, that is blatantly incorrect. Our system, Hyperianism, is mathematical, rationalist, and deductive, while science is about sense data, empiricism, and induction. The definition of empiricism is the doctrine that all knowledge is derived from sense experience, whereas rationalism is the doctrine that all knowledge is based on reason and not on religious faith or sense experience.
Knowledge is usually defined as justified true belief. This is not a very useful definition if we leave it at that, because we can be justified in believing something that isn't true. People do make honest mistakes. The point is that we can't know that we know something unless we address that true part. When is it okay to say that we're confident that something really is true? Rationalism says that since our senses are imperfect, we can only ever rely on pure logic to determine that something is true. We can have good reason to believe something based on empirical evidence, but we can't say that we know it unless we can construct a deductive argument which leads to that conclusion and in which all premises can be accepted a priori. The problem with rationalism is that while the premise, if Fido is a dog, then Fido is a mammal, can be accepted a priori based on the definitions of the words dog and mammal, the premise, Fido is a dog, cannot be accepted a priori. Therefore, the conclusion, Fido is a mammal, is impossible to reach. The argument is perfectly valid, but we can't know that the conclusion is true, because we can't know that Fido is a dog. No matter how much he looks like a dog, behaves like a dog, or impregnates other dogs that then give birth to perfectly healthy dog puppies. Under rationalism, you can never know that what you believe to be your dog really is a dog. What you can know under rationalism would include things like logical or mathematical theorems derived from definitions and axioms. Under empiricism, it's the other way around. You can know that Fido is a dog, and a mammal too for that matter, because that too can be determined empirically. But you can't know that Pythagoras' theorem is correct without measuring a bunch of right triangles. A mathematical proof, no matter how rigorous, does not give you any knowledge in and of itself. Truth in empiricism is not simply that which can be derived through logical reasoning, but that which comports with experience, whether it can be derived through logical reasoning or not. It's not that rationalists would require faith to accept that Fido is a mammal, or that empiricists would need faith to accept a mathematical proof. What this is all about is what counts as knowledge as opposed to mere justified belief. Keep in mind, faith is unjustified belief. Me, I'm not an empiricist, I'm actually a pragmatist. And contrary to what you might think, I'm pretty sure the same is true of most scientifically minded people. As a pragmatist, I don't see any meaningful distinction between knowledge and justified belief. If it's justified, then accept it as true and move on, but be prepared to reevaluate your position in the future as new information becomes available.
Furthermore, science is inductive, whereas our system is deductive. Deduction is a method of reasoning that guarantees 100% that the conclusion is true no matter what.
Nope. A deductive argument, assuming it's valid, only guarantees a true conclusion if the premises are true. If Fido is an octopus, then no, Fido is not a mammal, no matter how valid the argument is.
While induction is a method based on repeated tests that only ever gives a probability of something being true. No matter how good the inductive test is, it always has the probability of being wrong.
Remember that clip I said might come in handy?
Every era thinks that they have it all figured out, and the ideas of the past were crazy.
Those born in the early ages of humanity thought that their primitive stories about creation were true.
But in actuality, the people of the future will look back on scientific materialism as a primitive and childish view of reality. Classical mechanics was once considered to be absolutely true, and you were considered crazy by the scientific establishment if you thought otherwise. However, today it is known that classical mechanics is completely and utterly false.
First of all, classical mechanics was never considered absolutely true. There is no absolute truth in science. Science is a search for what could be called truth, but it is not the assertion that what has been found so far necessarily is the truth. Second, classical mechanics is known to be an incomplete model of physics. It's an approximation, but one that gives very useful results under many circumstances. Within certain limits, the error due to not accounting for quantum mechanical effects is far smaller than the errors already accounted for due to things like the limited accuracy of the instruments used to make the measurements. The limits of classical mechanics are well understood, and the model is not applied beyond those limits. To be completely and utterly false, every prediction it makes must be false, and by that I mean false beyond the calculated margin of error, so wrong that it's useless. The only thing completely and utterly false here is the statement you made, because classical mechanics is not known to be completely and utterly false. Oh, and by the way, do you know how we know that classical mechanics is incomplete? Through empirical observation. Now, didn't you say that...
However, today it is known. Now, understand what we're saying. Science has been great at coming up with advances in technology and medicine, and that's wonderful. But just because science comes up with material inventions does not mean that they know the truth about reality. That is a huge logical fallacy.
Not as you would define the words know, truth, and reality, no. But as those words are used by people who are more interested in making scientific progress and actually improving our lives, instead of arguing over how many angels can dance on the head of a pin in four-dimensional hyperbolic space, then yes, we can actually know that the truth is that in reality, Fido is a mammal. Or, well, at least he would be if he weren't hypothetical.
And fallacies are everywhere. For example, if a person prayed to God for someone that was sick to get better, and they did get better, it does not mean that it was because of the prayer. And just because science can come up with smartphones and smart pads does not mean that they know anything about the underlying nature of reality.
Actually, it does. Those two examples are completely different because smartphones and other inventions aren't produced at the rate we would expect from chance alone. That's what we would expect if our understanding of the underlying mechanisms was as wrong as you seem to think it is. The fact that science consistently gives useful results shows that it's at least close enough to the truth to do just that. Give useful results. Now, prayer, on the other hand, never gives any results better than what we'd expect from chance alone.
Max Planck, the famous physicist and who was the originator of quantum theory, said, "A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it." Science progresses one funeral at a time.
Appeal to authority, cherry picking, quote mining. Wow, did you take lessons from Winston Wu or something?
Think about this carefully. Let's say you just entered this universe for the first time, and you're trying to figure out what reality is. So you look at a table and you ask, what is a table? And the person might reply, well, a table is made out of wood. Now, has that really answered your question?
No, it's a piece of furniture consisting of a horizontal board which rests on a support structure. That would answer the question.
Of course not. You would have to know what wood is first, or else you're just trading words around.
Oh shit, I can see where this is going.
So if you ask, well, what is wood? Then you get the answer, well, wood is a composite of molecules. But of course, you don't know what molecules are. So you ask, well, what are molecules?
You're looking at this from the wrong direction. This thing there, I'm gonna call that a table. It's made of a material, and I'm gonna call that material wood. That wood consists of particles that I am going to call molecules.
Okay, so what are fundamental particles? No idea.
Really? They're the smallest known components of matter.
Everything in reality is composed of fundamental particles, yet science has not the faintest clue what they actually are. And if you can't account for what everything in the universe is made out of, you can't account for anything at all.
Discount Titan Bruggencate. That simply doesn't follow. Non sequitur.
The Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics says that reality is collapsed into existence by an unreal, random, probabilistic wave function. That's crazy. Reality is not based on an unreal, probabilistic wave function. Instead, reality is based on pure mathematical frequency, sine and cosine waves generated by the Euler formula.
So it's not based on an unreal wave function, but on an abstract mathematical sine function, and the former is crazy, but not the latter.
The Soul equation, whose interactions give rise to the space-time dimension and what humanity calls physical reality. Physical reality is not based on something unreal and random, as scientism absurdly claims. Instead, it is based on the immaterial singularity composed of living mathematical patterns, sine and cosine waves.
Prove it. You can start by defining, well, something.
Hyperianism rejects scientific materialism. It is a system based on a complete and consistent mathematical reality that supports a mental existence outside of space-time. It guarantees that you are an eternal mind, a soul of infinite energy that can never die, governed by the Euler formula.
Okay, I'll bite. Explain how you get from Euler's formula to whatever the hell you just said. I'll wait.
Ad astra, to the stars.
I'm sorry, how can you have any knowledge of stars? Don't you have to use your senses to